Entitled Colleague Tells Me Off for Grieving. I lost someone important recently. He was like my second dad. He helped raise me and I knew him my entire life, so when he passed, I've not been handling it too well. Mostly, I've just been in a daze during work, not really speaking to anyone. I've recently been doing much better thanks to my best friend. So when I returned to work after being off for the weekend, I was able to talk and joke around with my colleagues again. One particular colleague, who I used to be pretty friendly with, was ignoring me when I said hi to them. After a few attempts, I asked what was wrong. They proceeded to tell me off for not talking to them for the past week and that they get that I'm grieving, but they have had it so much worse because my dad died when I was 10 and no one can understand the pain I went through and you need to get over it. He wasn't even related to you, and my personal favorite, you'll never know what grief is like I do. Considering my bio dad, 3 sets of grandparents, mom was adopted, and now recently my second dad have passed away. I found that comment to be a bit shit. I didn't say anything and just walked away. Suffice it to say, we won't be talking as much anymore. I would have told that asshole to fuck off. I am so sorry for your loss. That is so disrespectful to say that to you. At least you only have to work with them and don't have to live with someone so self-centered. Glad that your friend is helping you. Ignore them, take care of yourself. Colleague sounds like it's got martyr syndrome. You do realize this person had the monopoly on grief. You shouldn't have tried to steal his thunder. Seriously though. Sorry for your loss. Bereavement affects people differently. But for your coworker to turn it into a competition is bizarre. You sound more emotionally mature. Colleague is an asshole. A friend of mine since kindergarten, and we're in our 40s now, lost her mom when we were in 3rd grade. I lost my mom when I was 29. You know what she didn't do? She didn't tell me that at least I had a mom 20 years longer than she did. It's not a competition. When someone decides that an individual's new grief over a recent loss should be dismissed because someone else's grieving process that started ages ago, everyone loses. Had a boss say something like this to me when my step-grandfather passed away. He had been in my life for close to 30 years. Boss man stated that he really wasn't my grandfather, just my stepdad's dad. When his grandfather passed, he was back at work the same day. I told him I'm sorry that he's not close to his family, walked away. Kinda pissed him off. Best reply: it's not a contest. So sorry for your loss. Your colleague is a major asshole and not a friend. If I were you, I wouldn't talk to this person ever again. What an entitled a-hole. I don't understand for the life of me why people feel the need to tell you to get over something that has absolutely nothing to do with them. How the hell can people be jealous of grief? Shit blows my mind, honestly. So this asshole is trying to compare grief, but at the same time downplaying and dismissing yours because you weren't related? I'd ask that fool if he would say the same thing to someone who lost a wife or a husband, since they technically weren't related. What a full-blown 2-bit moron. Good on you for walking away. I'd have went to jail over that get over it shit. Your colleague needs reminded grief isn't a competitive sport. Though losing a parent at 10 is a huge loss, they've had at least a decade to get accustomed to the loss. You've had weeks to process. Fact someone is related to you or not is irrelevant if they play a large part in your life. I do wonder though if this has stirred up bad memories for your colleague and they are struggling to handle that. But that is a them problem, not a you problem. We lost my father young. My brother was lucky and found himself a person who really took over, not in a creepy, groomy way. We made sure. Unfortunately, he passed away recently too. Watching my brother lose a second dad is so painful. I can't even imagine what he or you are going through. I am so sorry. I would be happy to give your colleague a few choices words on both of your behalfs. But truly, please take some time for yourself to grieve both for you bonus dad and all of the feelings it brings up of your loved ones who have passed. Don't you love when grief is a competition? It's not a competition. We can both be sad. Be glad this person stopped talking to you. What a jerk. Sorry for your loss. Tell them you didn't know you had to compete for a medal in the Grief Olympics. Other narcissistic asshole trying to win the suffering Olympics. Never speak to this person about anything again unless HR is in on it. I doubt this person is like this with just you. Take a breather. Find your space. Avoid and ignore this idiot. That is simply shitty. Cool, thanks for making my personal tragedy about you. I had a coworker like this. So self-absorbed. I was so glad when he moved on. The anger and petty revenge he would exact on others if they had the nerve to get sick, go on vacation, take any leave for any reason could only be described as insane. Could you ask him if am I allowed to be sad about things? My dad didn't die when I was 10. Colleague may be jealous and never had sympathetic support at that young age. Certainly stunted regardless. Needs a therapist to speak directly to his issues. You need to go directly to HR and report this. Bet HR would find that shit interesting. You don't need this person. I worked with someone like that. I call it one-up syndrome. Everything is either much worse for them than what you are going through or something much better. Then the good thing that happened to you happened to them. Those kind of people can F right off. I am sorry for your loss. Grief isn't a contest. Just like pain. It's selfish to play that game. Sounds like your work friend is a narcissistic. I didn't speak to you last week because I was in a fog due to my grief. I won't be speaking to you in the future because you are an asshole and not worth my time. What an asshole. I hate when people try to turn grieving into a competition almost. I am so sorry for your loss. Your colleague is a total self-centered entitled No one has the right to dismiss your grief. Family is who you make them. Sending prayers and hugs. Time will help but you will never forget but hopefully the memories will turn from tears to smiles. So very sorry for your loss. What a wanker with no heart that colleague of yours is. I'd stay well clear and refuse to engage. I'm so sorry for your loss. Disappointed I had someone complain to me how dare her boyfriend's adult children be sad about their father's passing. Theirs was just grief, while hers was sorrow and so much worse. This was about 3 months after my beloved father had passed. They were upset that you were grieving because they wouldn't grieve if they were the same person as you. That's the logic of a crazy person. Grieving isn't a competition. Pay him the same amount of attention that you'd give a random stranger who told you to wear blue. Talk to that colleague only on work related. Know him, don't need the extra tea. Even greet, ignore him. Sounds very much like he was jealous of the sympathy you were getting. I wouldn't give him the time of day anymore. This is why coworkers to me are just coworkers, nothing more, nothing less. When the hell did it become who's the bigger victim? That coworker can kick rocks. He's playing doom poker. I'll see your dead loved one and raise you a childhood loss and a gross. I'm so sorry for your hard loss. That comment was not okay and more about them than you. Be kind to yourself and enjoy the happy memories when they pop up in your head. You were brave to just walk away. Well done. Somebody always thinks they have it worse. They will tell you their problems all day but you can't talk about yours. Rude. Self-entitled people should not have a spot on your friend list. I am sorry for your loss. Why do people feel the need to compare grief? It astounds me that it's so common. My friend lost her grandfather a few years after I lost my stepbrother. And actually said, I know you were closer to yours than I was to mine, and I got all stern and told her not to measure her feelings against mine. Not helpful. Oh, and your coworker can go get dunked on. FTB. I lost my 14-year-old son. When I went back to work, my feelings were still very tender. I tried very hard to leave my grief at the door of the hospital. But you can't just stop and start your grief. There were rare times when I had to walk away for a few moments to collect myself when colleagues talked to me about my son. At my end-of-year evaluation, I was dinged for this. Told I needed to leave my emotions at home. Unfortunately, some people really just don't understand grief if they haven't experienced it. I was widowed at 30. And I overheard my own mother on the phone saying, I just don't understand why she's not over it. After 3 weeks. And I do even have a contentious relationship with her. We're quite close, but she didn't like her parents. And her husband, children, and siblings are all alive. So she has never experienced a profound loss. And her 28 extra years of life mean nothing in that regard. Your experience isn't that bad compared to X is almost never an appropriate or constructive response to hardship. I'm so sorry for your loss. Friend. One day I hope you think of them with smiles and laughter instead of tears. With an aching fondness instead of hurt. There are few epitaphs as wonderful as a smile and laughter. May his memory be a blessing. Red Heart. As your best friend, they can go fuck themselves. You're doing amazing. You Ramirix 963 Heart. OMG, what a. Yeah, you don't have to talk to this person anymore. I have had this said to me. I asked, is this a competition? End of conversation. I have lost a lot of family members too. But that doesn't make me the gatekeeper of grief. If anything, that should make him empathize with you more, not less. Shrug. That guy can take a long walk on a short boardwalk. Lol. Wow. Considering he's been through grief himself, I feel like it would have made him incredibly understanding and want to help you work through yours. His comments are absolute trash. I'm so sorry. You had to deal with that after mourning a loved one. That's a narcissist. Now you know to stay away. Sounds like a typical narcissist. I'd block them quick. WTF? They have issues. FFS. This tosspot has no right to judge your or anybody else's grief. I lost my father as a young child, but that doesn't mean that I get to use that to diminish another person's grief. In my experience, that made me more understanding to friends when they lost their own parents, and I was glad to be able to be a support to them in their own grieving processes if they needed it. The coworkers should have empathy because they know what it is like to lose a parent or parental figure. It is basic decency to not compare loss of loved ones, especially when the loss is fresh. Arg. No matter what you say, this guy will always have it worse. You got a paper cut. His arm nearly fell off. Don't even bother engaging with him except for work-related items. He's just looking to play the victim. FFS. It's not a contest. I lost my dad when I was 21. Even though I was an adult, it destroyed me. When I hear that a friend or acquaintance lost their dad or father figure, I feel terrible for them. Because I know how awful it was for me. Considering my bio dad, 3 sets of grandparents, mom was adopted, and now recently my second dad have passed away. I found that comment to be a bit shit. I'd have told him so. In front of everyone. And then I'd go write down that he said it and when. So if he made any kind of complaints even about something else about me in the future, I kid and would drag up the note and say, oh, he's retaliating. I missed the memo that grief is now an Olympic sport. Sorry for your loss. Losing somebody close is always hard. Very sorry for the loss of your dad. Death brings out the best and worst. You have not lost anything by NCing the toxic. Ugh. Very sad. Sounds like your colleague really needs therapy to process trauma. Still doesn't excuse what they said. Sorry. The other reaction is, wow, did you really mean to say that out loud? Then walk away. Her dad died when she was 10. Yours died recently. She's telling you to get over it. You never fully get over the death of a loved one, but you move on and the world keeps turning. But to say that to someone who has very recently lost someone is very callous. You're much nicer than I would have been. I'd poop on his desk. Just so he could relate to something. You know, one piece of shit to another. Pretty sure your work colleague is the type to scream out the lyrics to Crawling in My Skin in the shower and maintain a shitty edgelord poetry page on LiveJournal. X200B. Sorry for the loss, mate. As for the other guy, well, I'm sure word will get around the office. Holy crap though, they really used the "no one understands my pain" bit. I shouldn't be laughing so hard at them. But I am. Geez, how are these people so self-centered? How dare that crooked-nosed knave of a coworker. Grief is grief. It cannot be explained or denied. It's definitely not a competition for most suffering awards. Jaded attitudes to friends' grief processes are rude. Your associate is a grief hog and wants to be comforted because you know grief as a minnow, not a whale, and his whale has a big appetite. Sadly, he can just suck it up as you process your loss. Grief isn't a competition. The attitude that her grief is more valid than yours is myopic. Sounds like she has a case of main character syndrome and not a person to associate with beyond work matters. Your grief and feelings are valid, and no one gets to tell you otherwise. I know a person kinda like this. Your pain can never equal their pain. Your trauma can never equal their trauma. When your grief outshines theirs, they get insanely jealous. Pain and grief belong to them and them only. They secretly get off on being the most unfortunate individual in their world. It's their attention card, not your problem. Glad you're doing better, dog. In general, that pisses me off when my mom does it all the time. Like, I'll be complaining about my healed broken back and she'll go, I know. I broke my leg before. She's super sweet and all, but people cannot make shit about themselves. I'm not sure why it's so important for you to win the Grief Olympics. But if it makes this conversation stop, I will award you with the gold medal. Happy now? There's always one, isn't there? And you met them head on. I'm sorry for your loss. Tell her my cousin was 6 weeks old when her dad died at 26. My dad was 55. His B-in-law was 47. There's always someone worse off than you and You don't get over it. You learn to live with it. That's maybe something you could say to her? Have you learned to live with it yet? Bless you, X. Wow. Somebody really thinks it's all about them. I'm sorry you had to deal with this ridiculous and callous colleague. Your self-centered friends don't seem to be able to understand that it's not about them. Sounds like an HR issue. Some people just can't understand that others can have the same traumas in their life. Just give him space if he wants to be like that. He is self-centered and likely has always been. You just didn't have a moment to see it come out. To speak to you like that. He is obviously in a lot of pain. It's not an excuse and obviously was the wrong thing to say. Probably put some space between y'all for a while. Sorry for your loss. Your coworker is such an asshole. You're grieving for someone who was like a second dad to you and they told you to get over it. Seriously, fuck your colleague. Ask them why do they think it's a who suffered more competition. My condolences. Tell her that grief is not a competition. Your colleague is horrible. I am terribly sorry for your loss. I wouldn't speak to them again, but would definitely let your HR person and manager know about what they said. It is in no way okay. If your colleague approaches you again, I would say this: your comments were completely and utterly disgraceful. You do not have any say or authority on how others grieve. Grief is not a competition. Dismissing my feelings because you felt slighted over nothing was disgusting. Shame on you. Then never speak to them again. I'm very sorry for your loss. If your coworker persists, and you decide you want to end the friendship, you could always go with, then I guess it's a good thing your dad didn't live long enough to see how you turned out. I think friends' poor me attitude in dismissing adult grief is a common response from folks who lost a parent in childhood. My colleague who lost his mom, not surrogate mom, around continually doesn't get adult mourning. BCZ in his mind. None of that compares to childhood mourning. Also, my friend was validated by outsiders' pity for motherless him, which makes his grief bitterness feel even more that adult grief is nothing. It's not about you. It's deeper than you, though that doesn't make it okay. My last message to them would be, with that attitude of yours, I'll be surprised if someone were to grieve for you passing. Won't be surprised at all though if they throw a party. I understand. Childhood upheaval. My uncle raised me in family foster through my teens. My dad and I hadn't seen each other in 28 years. Even though we reconnected, it is my uncle who I revere rather than my dad. No animosity but circumstances. Interestingly, my brother feels the same way, although he stayed with him to graduate from the same HS. Both our respect and love center on our uncle. There is no "I had it worse than you did" benchmark. It is deeply personal and no one has the right to impose their experience over yours. I'm very sorry. My condolences. I'm petty, especially when this kind of thing is on, and would have gone to HR and filed a formal complaint. They absolutely do not get that you were grieving. I'd stay away from them going forward too. My feeling is that work is work, and if you can make one friend you can actually trust at work, then that's rare and awesome. I don't know how feasible that is because oftentimes people at work are all trying to get ahead and, in some cases, you better not be in their way. I hope it doesn't sound too stern, but the bottom line is that you and everyone else is there for a paycheck. That's it. I'm sorry for your loss. Heartbreak crying. Being a one-upper is my biggest personality pet peeve of all time. Sorry for your loss. It sounds like your colleague is overly competitive to the point that even grief is a competition. They have to win. It's not a grieving competition. She's an Just be polite to get through working with her, otherwise she can piss off. My condolences. A significant person in your life need not be blood related. The fact that you love them is the important thing. Why? Just why? Who would think it's okay to just tell someone to stop grieving because someone close to them died? But they weren't related? They need to stop being an entitled idiot. Still, just why? And I'm very sorry for your loss. Like others have said, grief is not a competition. Just breathe. Ignore idiots like that. Tell I'm so sorry that they treated you that way and invalidated your grief completely. You did not deserve that. Good luck, op. I've been going through the grieving process myself. I lost my ear to cancer. I'm not a worker anywhere, but I understand how frustrating and hard it is on the mind, body, and spirit when you lose anyone important in your life. PPLE need to be more compassionate and caring towards PPLE who are grieving, so that's my 2 cents. Ooh, I just love it when people turn grief into a competition. I'm really sorry for all your losses. People who turn trauma into some sort of competition where the only winner is themselves. Make my blood boil. I am sorry for your loss. I hope you continue to heal and feel better with time. As for your coworker friend, well, they made it easy to write them off. Don't sweat it. Just treat them as a colleague and invest no further effort into worrying about them. Sounds like they were mad they were not at the center of your world while you were grieving. This friendship is not a big loss in the grand scheme of things. SMH, why do some people believe they need to one-up someone in trauma? Everyone is different and experiences loss differently. They can't be compared. That's the type of person who uses the death of their parent to get attention all these years later. Instead of having a good personality. It's not a suffering contest. When did grief become such a pissing contest? I never understood why people feel the need to tell others how to grieve and why you should grieve. Only for certain people. So sorry for your loss. I never understood why some people think you can quantify grief. I would like to think that if someone suffered so much grief in their own lives, that would make them a tad more understanding regarding your loss. You handled the situation very well and I would just cut them loose. If they want to be friends again, so be it. But it's on them to make the first step. I never understood why some people think grief and/or trauma is a competition. There's your sign thinking face. I have a cousin who was and still possibly is like this. His bio dad passed away when he was young, so he always implied he had the monopoly on grief. I'll never forget when we were outside smoking back when we used to hang out and he was asking about my depression. For a second I was going to try to talk to him about it until the next sentence came out of his mouth. I actually have a reason to be depressed. I immediately changed my mind. What a dick. You can't quantify or compare pain. You have no idea what the other person is going through. Sorry for your loss, op. Straight to HR. They won't do shit about it, but it's likely this colleague may screw you if it's expedient to do so. Having this interaction logged will cover your ass when they do. This person just gave you a free pass to ignore them forever. What a horrible, self-centered, envious person. Who gets jealous of or is bothered by someone else's grief? I lost my old daddy early last year. You have my deepest condolences on the passing of your loved one, who was like a second dad to you. Big hugs. Grace and peace to you in the coming days, weeks, and months. My grief is bigger than your grief. Good Lord, what a jackass. Ignore people who, for whatever reason, feel the need to compete with your grief. You've got enough going on. I'd walk up to them and say what you said to me was not okay. We did have a good working relationship, but you've ruined that. Don't interact with me again. Oh, and by the way, you may want to get some therapy because if you're bothered by seeing someone grieve, that's more of a you problem. And you might have friends. Have a nice day. Classic it's all about me attitude. What a jackass. Terrible shame that this person has coped with their grief in an unhealthy way, leading them to poorer relating with people in their life. Probably the only way they know how to do things. Got nothing to do with you though. Their traumas are theirs. Your pain is yours. Sending you love up. Good job on just walking away. And yep, that person has now made it onto the people I only communicate with at work when their input is required list, so treat them like you would the clerk at a store you don't frequent often. Polite but no personal info sharing. I hate when people try to say that they have it so much worse than someone else. It's not a contest. Your coworker is an asshole. Clearly this person isn't over it themselves and need to find a way to grieve properly. Should have thrown hands with that fuck. Bet he would have changed his time real quick. I am so sorry, op. What an your work colleague is like they are the only one who has ever experienced grief. It's not a compassion. I'm glad you're done being friendly to that I hate when people try to make something that doesn't involve them at all about them. Thank you. Yes, I'm doing better every day. I know that my mom is in a better place. She's not in pain anymore. She's free to fly like a butterfly. The day after she died, I remember going outside and seeing lots of butterflies. I knew it was my mom telling me she's okay now. For whoever is grieving, I understand how you feel. People are so insensitive and rude these days. Instead of being insensitive and rude, be compassionate and caring. So because your grief was so immeasurable, I'm not allowed to feel any? Leave some for the rest of us. Dick. You should make an anonymous report to HR. Or my personal favorite, take their email and sign them up for every scam site you can find. Sorry for your loss. Mending heart. Some people think they have the monopoly on suffering. Sorry for your loss. I would tell your other co-workers about it and let it spread like wildfire. That behavior shouldn't be accepted. What a complete narcissist. This person is not your friend. He is not your friend. I had two people I considered as grandparents, my older half-siblings, grandma and grandpa. They always treated me and my younger full sibling just like their other grandkids, despite us not being related. Grandma died a few years ago and grandpa died the following year, and before them I lost 2 out of my 3 living bio-grandparents and an aunt. All of those deaths hit me hard. Grieve isn't a competition, and you don't have to be blood related to the person to grieve them. This is something some people just don't understand. It ain't a competition. Your office friend no more sounds to me like they never learned to fully process their own grief. Usually the insensitive people are those that haven't experienced it like you and I have. And they're just so damned clueless until they experience a close relative or friend dying. Your co-worker was probably not allowed to, or it was frowned on to grieve, usually after an acceptable amount of time, especially at 10. Of course you're right to distance yourself from them. I'm so sorry for your loss. My cat died and I told work my friend died. She was 15. I would have said my uncle died for the very reason of unreasonable coworkers. This person sucks. Red heart, red heart, red heart. Put in a formal complaint. That's harassment. People are awe when they think they own the monopoly on grief or trauma. We all handle these things differently. But it's dismissive as f#ck when people pull this shit when someone has been struggling. Comparing grief and or traumas does nothing but hurt and make the damages worse. I'm sorry for your losses. You have the right to grieve as you need, and if others don't understand, then FCK them. Grief is grief, and we all experience so many different stages after losing a loved one. I'm sorry your colleague was so insensitive, and I suspect they haven't dealt well with their loss. So many families don't know how to deal with death. Not sure what I would do in a professional environment, but keeping your distance seems wise. And I'm so sorry for your loss. May the memories of him be treasured. Sorry you're going through some sadness. But good for you for walking away. When my dad passed a little over 4 years ago, I took a week off. My manager and team weren't too thrilled about that to begin with. The first week I was back at work, I had a team member go on and on complaining about her parents, husband and kids after she said, well, you're lucky you don't have kids and you should put your mom in a nursing home to maybe it's a sign to have kids now. It's like WTF. My dad just passed. Yeah, I ended up avoiding her during our breaks and kept conversations to a minimal during working hours. Gatekeeping grief. That's a new level of entitlement. I wasn't aware grief was a contest. May your memories be a blessing. And you are correct. Silence is always the best response to that kind of crap. Now you know where you stand with this person and are probably better off. Be sure to always be polite when they speak to you first and say hi first thing in the morning to them. That way when they decide to complain about you when you don't do as they wish, your true rebuttal is that you always greet them in the morning and you always respond politely when they speak to you. Report to HR. Never speak to them again. Everyone experiences AMD processes grief differently. And he was trying to trivialize your grieving by making it about his. I hate this so much for you. I'm sorry that happened and I know how you feel. No one understands grief as grief, like we are not here to tit for tat with each other. When I was 21 my father has passed away and I was barely old enough to know who I was, let alone watch my entire life change. When I came back to work, one of the providers I was working with was really rude to me and I was still sensitive to losing my dad. So I walked away, cried, got myself together. When I came back, I was told you should have taken family medical leave since you are a crybaby. I couldn't believe how many people lack empathy. Everyone handles grief differently. What she went through cannot compare to what you're going through. I am so sorry that you are dealing with the pain of losing someone close as well as putting up with this BS from a coworker. Why are there people who think something as grieving is some kind of a competition? We all lose loved ones during our lifetime and deal with those losses in so many different ways. So sorry for your loss. Even though it is something terrible that happened to you, it was an eye-opener so you can distance yourself from this person. Yeah, that's a straight to HR type thing. Someone has serious main character syndrome, don't they? Yeah, you don't need someone like that in your life, even if it's just at work. Sounds like EC has a rampant and intractable case of not center of attentionitis. People like that can just do one. You take as much time as you need to grieve in whatever way works for you. This isn't the grief Olympics. Sending love and kind thoughts, and hoping you find peace and joy in your memories instead of heartache and sorrow soon. I'm so sorry for your loss. Grief is not a competition, and I don't understand why some people feel the need to compete with their loss being worse than someone else's. It's sick. As someone who lost his bio dad at 3, now more recently 1.5 years ago, my stepdad never married, but we all moved in together when I was 5-6, and also have no surviving grandparents. I really get you. It's incredibly tough to lose one father, yet alone too. All I can say is the pain will hopefully get better for you, like it has in a small way for me. Keeping your cool with your colleague was the right move. An easy way to diffuse this is by agreeing that you will get over this and that they are clearly winning the victim Olympics. Yeah, fuck that person. I will never understand why so many people are hateful about someone grieving. Grieve however works for you. You don't owe anyone an apology for feeling the depth of that loss. All that says about you is that you are capable of deep love. This is beyond. Each of us lose people during our lifetime. I don't feel you can quantify for another person how he experienced it. Losing my grandmother was hard, but I knew she went as she wished. Died in her sleep. While losing friends during the service was totally different. I still think of my grandma every day, as the only thing I requested was the dining table set. I still think of the friends I've lost as well, although not as often. There are still days that I walk around with a thread in my mind dedicated to them. No one can tell you how to grieve and for how long. The important ones we carry with us. Sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry they said that to you. The sad thing about grief. Many times people expect others to grieve like them, not understanding grief is different for each of us. Grief trauma. They feel their grief is more valid and that others is not reasonable. I have had a super small bit of it after my mom died, but because I had to sign her life over and held her hand as she passed and closed her eyes and shit. Nye 48 stroke. The experience. It can make some people coming to you with their stuff really hard to take serious when you have experienced worse. I don't compare though. I just tell people I am not a good person to grieve to. But I am totally with the grief. Do it, and however you need to. I just am not good at helping at all. Same thing happened to me. Told him to go fuck off. Haven't spoke to him in 12 years. Yeah, sometimes people love to participate in the grief Olympics without realizing that there are only losers there. Why are you posting here? Your first response should have been to email our ASAP. You are the driver of your grief train. You get to kick off the train anyone who tries to tell you you're doing it wrong. Also, grief is not a competition. I'm so sorry your special person has died. You have a big, beautiful emotional scrapbook that will help you along your bereavement journey. Wow, almost like he's jealous of the extra attention you got? It's him and not you. Give him time and he will get over it. He's still grieving himself even though it's been years. Last company I worked with, there was a woman in my department that was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was caught early and she started radiation therapy. After her second appointment, my husband passed away and I was off work for a couple of weeks. When I came back, she wouldn't talk to me. Turns out she was upset that I had taken the focus off her. She was upset with me for something I had no control over. People are stupid and selfish. And life isn't a competition. Sorry for you loss and your stupid coworker. Grief is not a contest to be won. I'm sorry for your pain. Take all the time you need. Screw that self-righteous posse, you're better off never knowing them. I'm sorry you lost your dad at 10. That sucks. But you don't own the navigation rights to grief. In fact, you don't get to tell me that I don't know what grief is. You don't even know me. So kindly fuck off. This is a person who has to make everything about them. They lack empathy. I think reducing contact with them is a good approach. You can be friendly to them without being friends. WTF, grief can't be defined. You were shocked, I am sure. Apparently these co-workers have bigger issues. They have no right to disrespect you in this way. Oh fuck off, both of my parents were dead by my 19th birthday, so that's a pathetic excuse for being an arsehole, and no one has a right to tell you how to grieve. Fuck them and fuck their idiotic way of thinking. Also, it fucking sucks. Just take your time and do what you need to do. Whoa, is that motherfucker? What a self-righteous prick. What's wrong with you when you try to make someone else's grief about you? That's some borderline shit. Nope. Not friends. Not colleagues. No longer my cohort. Now they are a work acquaintance. You need to report that to HR just so there's record of it. If the colleague starts to escalate or tries to spin it and report you to HR, you could be the one in trouble. Sorry for your loss. I lost my mother almost a week ago. Everyone deals with grief their own way. Fuck your colleague, you deserve better than that selfish asshole. Of all the ridiculous gatekeepers that I can't stand, those who gatekeep others' grief are lower than microscopic organisms. If you ever speak to this person again, let them know that the internet thinks they're a disgusting entitled posse. Introduce me to your coworker. I promise I only want to talk. OMFG, I lost my dad a year ago. It was and is the hardest thing I've gone through. No one has the right, and I can't believe someone had the nerve to say a damn thing to you. Grieving is hard and there is no right way to do it. There's been a lot of deaths in my family. I even came home and found my dead fiancé, but losing my dad has rocked me to the core. As much as they say time heals and it gets easier, I feel like it gets harder. And it sucks. Your coworker is a jerk. I wouldn't want to be friends with someone who would say something like that anyway. I was worse off than you were, but that made me better than you. That is so toxic. OMG, this sounds like a girl I work with. The first thing she said to me when I returned to work after my father died was that her mother died when she was young. And that is much more difficult. She didn't say it directly to is obnoxious, but has no balls, and tends to say things to other people when she is sure you can hear. It's a special kind of narcissistic asshole who thinks their suffering is always worse than others. Wow. Grief isn't a contest. I would stare them in the face, never breaking eye contact, and say, grief is not a competition. Walk away and work. Friendship done. You think I didn't talk to you last week? Wait till I don't talk to you at all. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm so sorry your coworker is being an asshat. My husband just lost a family friend, similar to yours. He's having a rough time. I'm truly sorry for your loss. However, at least this is someone you were pretty friendly with and not a close friend you depended on for support. You are seeing this person for who they really are, self-centered and completely unable to empathize with others. You are smart to keep your distance. Focus on those who really support you as you find your way through your grief. This person is not worth another thought. I wish you the best of luck in your healing journey. Screw that entitled colleague. I've been going through the same thing with stuff in my life. I've started to just not engage with anyone like this anymore. I'll go out of my way to avoid these types. That person is such a jerk. Good riddance. You deserve better friends than that. Fuck that. I don't get why some people act like having loved ones die or trauma is a pissing contest over who had it worse. It is insane to me, because who cares who had it worse? Why not just let someone grieve? I don't care if it was someone's pet fish. If they loved it and are grieving because it died, I will fucking grieve with them. Dad or friend or aunt or pet loved ones fucking hurts and is the absolute worst part of this life. Your coworker is an asshole. I am sorry for your loss. Keep those fun memories you shared in your heart. Wow, I'm glad to hear that you're not going to expose yourself to that kind of toxic mess again. A real friend would never do that. People who try to one-up you in the grief stakes are the worst. Your colleague doesn't deserve any of your time. People don't get to tell you how to grieve. It's that simple. Some people can recover from grief really quickly. Others will struggle for years. I'm pretty good at coping with grief, but I know when either of my parents or my godparents die, I'm gonna struggle massively. And I'm not ashamed of that. You grieve how and for as long as you want. Anyone who judges or criticizes you for that are definitely not a friend. Gatekeeping grief and making it a competition, comparing trauma. Not okay. So sorry you're having to deal with this. Sorry for your loss. Not gonna lie. I'd have told them to stick their opinion somewhere that they'd need a very good surgeon to remove it. I wouldn't talk to that person again. In fact, report them for it. They can't treat you like that. I'd tell her, if all people who haven't suffered like you did can go to hell, it'll soon be overflowing. Tell him he is cold, heartless, and a poor excuse for a human. If he can't recognize the pain others are suffering and empathize with them, then he should say nothing. Report them to HR. Most people will take a week off when losing someone important. But she was plain cruel and should not let that slide. They do not know your life and they should not say such horrible things. Wow. Please, for our sake, go to that colleague and say sweet and gently, hey, I've been thinking about what you said. And I just wanted you to know that you're an asshole. And a dipshit. Shitty behavior, but not really entitled. It sounds like your coworker still carries a lot of pain. It sounds like they didn't get the attention and compassion that they needed and they are projecting that anger at you. Yes. It's rude, but it is helpful to remember that it is about themselves and not you. I am sorry for your loss and wish you healing. I wish the same for your coworker. How can she say that her grief is worse than anyone else's? How entitled can one person be? Everyone grieves differently and at different levels. Tell her to do one until she grows up. Hope you're okay. Not him trying to one-up grief. Prima donna syndrome. No one knows pain like I know pain. You may want to rope in HR just in case they file a complaint. If this is where they are now, I see it going much worse soon. What is this? A pissing match to see who can lose the closest person to us. Man, your colleague is the awe. You need to take this to HR. That's out of control. I'd be damned if someone compared their losses to mine. I'm sorry for your loss too. By the way, pensive face. NTA. I may have said that everyone grieves, but there is no winner in grieving. If you are still finding it that hard that you have no empathy for anyone else's grief, I suggest you go to counseling.